This series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to suggest some possible explanations, but not necessarily the only ones, to the mysteries we will examine.
Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series.
Welcome to another episode of Battle of the Network shows. I'm Mike, and I'm here with Rick, and today we're venturing into the world of nonfiction with In Search of.
Yes, look at the unexplained, the mysterious, the paranormal.
Right.
All that kind of stuff.
Yeah, with our host.
Leonard Nimoy. Yes, the iconic Leonard Nimoy hosted this, and would you like me to talk a little bit about... In Search of was a half-hour show. It was syndicated. It was on for about 5 years, late 70s, actually, 1977 to, I think, 1982-ish. And I think it had a lot of like weekend time slots, a half-hour show once a week. And it used a blend of reenactments and documentary footage to tell these stories. And it used a lot of kind of cool synthesizer music.
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy would narrate and introduce and do like intros and outros, and usually appear during the episode and sort of give his take. And his narration, just his voice and the general manner he had about him, made him an excellent choice to host this. And I think the show is fondly remembered by those who have seen it, although you don't really see it a lot in its original form nowadays. It is on DVD. The complete run is on DVD. It was repackaged, and A&E Networks and History Channel ran it, but they revamped the opening and ending sequences, and I guess in an attempt to modernize it. And from what I understand, some versions even cut out any Leonard Nimoy on-camera appearances, which is just ridiculous, I guess, because they thought it would make the show look dated. To me, the fact that the show is dated is part of its charm. That's what I enjoy about it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sort of looks like, just kind of like you're watching an old educational film in school, but it's a little bit more interesting than that. It has like an ambiguity about it. Right. It suggests things without actually solving things.
Yeah.
And it's definitely of its era, and it has everything that you would kind of want from a show from the the 1970s about the paranormal. I think it pretty much delivers that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I find the like on this show, I find it kind of amusing and charming, but on that type of show, which of course still exists on Discovery Channel and stuff, the ambiguity can be infuriating.
Yes.
because you get the impression that they're going to give you an answer.
Yeah.
And then it usually ends with a bunch of questions.
Yeah, and this show did that as well, and yeah. I freely admit that I hold anything from that era to a totally different standard. If it came on today, I would not watch this kind of thing. I would hate the reenactments, probably. I would hate that ambiguity. I would hate the teases.
Yeah.
But watching it today, it's like, well, these are 20-some minutes. They're cool. They've got their atmosphere and kind of that time capsule aspect to it. So I love watching these, even if they're not always the most thrilling things. There's something about them and Nimoy's presence that makes them very compelling.
Yeah, and so we're kind of just freely discuss two episodes we watched, one about Amelia Earhart and one about the Loch Ness Monster. But one thing about the Amelia Earhart one is that the questions are still, even now, basically the same.
True. I think, that's one thing. I think you could go back through a lot of the episodes, and there might be some of them that have been quote-unquote solved.
Yeah.
I think more likely it's probably like things that they've said or suggested have been refuted, but
Right.
not necessarily that they've solved other things, like things about the Bermuda Triangle or things like,
Yeah, I know there's one about the Titanic, so obviously that's been figured out.
Right. I think there were some things that have been debunked by then. I'm not sure that they had too many eureka moments in the show. I think and the show had famous topics over the years. I think one of the more famous ones was probably they did a show on killer bees. Pretty early in the show's run, well, I can remember killer bees coming back as a thing like years later.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just, in 1977 they were panicking about this, and it turned out nothing came of it. As a
Right.
matter of fact, I think we're worried about bees, period, now.
Yeah.
Like surviving, let alone killer bees coming over, through
Making their-
Mexico.
yeah.
So the episodes we watched were in the first season, and I think if you look at all the episode titles and some of the topics, and you go through the show's run, it seems like that first season they had a real solid array of topics.
Right.
Then it kind of gets a little sketchier, and they're kind of trying to recycle and reuse certain themes as the show goes on. And also, like, the first couple of episodes, Rod Serling actually was the narrator, and then I think maybe like a pilot version of the show, and then eventually they brought in Nimoy
Right.
to do the whole rest of the run.
I think that would have worked pretty well too.
Yeah, Serling would have been great as well.
Yeah.
And Nimoy hosts it. He's always he's credible, and he doesn't take an ironic way of hosting it.
No.
He acts like someone who is genuinely intrigued by these things, and he's open to possibilities. He doesn't do this mockingly or anything like that.
Yeah. And he also doesn't. He's not over dramatic
No, he doesn't.
in his reading. Like this will sound weird, but like on Unsolved Mysteries, Robert Stack
Yeah,
sounds a little over dramatic.
right. It's almost like a self-parody
Yeah.
at times. Not the case with Nimoy. I never
No.
found that in these
I
instances.
was surprised, maybe more than by anything in the shows, that he still had his Spock hair
Yeah,
at that point. Like I thought he only had his Spock hair when he played Spock,
yeah.
but because I know, I saw, just looking through YouTube clips and stuff, like, just the still, every now and then it would be him, and like later he looked at a mustache and
Yeah.
stuff.
I mean, he definitely had some real full-on '70s looks in this show and in his on-camera segments. But yeah, overall he was a great host, and the show, obviously as a kid, this had it worked on a different level than it does to me now, and some of this stuff was genuinely creepy or provocative,
Yeah.
when you're a young child, and I do remember watching this as a kid and enjoying it, but I seem to recall, like, when I was first exposed to it, the station that came on was kind of a snowy station. This was like in the pre-cable days. So it came on like Sundays, something like that, maybe in the afternoon, actually. It seems like an ideal late night show. Now,
Yeah.
it's kind of fun to watch these, late at night. But back then, I seem to recall it coming on weekend afternoons and kind of in a snowy UHF channel that I didn't always get. So I wasn't able to watch it like every week or anything, but I do remember being aware of it and enjoying the show. And then years later, kind of thinking, boy, I wish they'd put that back on again.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I feel like in where I grew up, it came on like Saturday afternoon, kind of in that right after the cartoons ended, but before the sports started.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe then there weren't, maybe every channel didn't have sports on all the time on Saturday.
Well, and also you wouldn't have like even with sports, you wouldn't have like the endless pregame shows like you do
Right.
now. So you'd have more of a time for transition where you could put on like Wild Kingdom or something like
Yeah.
this.
And this and a couple other things. I just remember Land of the Giants and some other shows like that I associate with like noon on Saturday or 1 o'clock on Saturday or something when, I'd been watching TV for
Yeah.
5 hours already.
Right.
But yeah, it was always cool. Now so the ones we watched had vintage openings, which still weren't the openings I quite remember, because I guess the one that's in my head is maybe from a later season, it's slightly different, where they had more, because they have little stills from different episodes,
Yeah.
and I guess once they'd built up more episodes, they could have. I seem to remember like a crystal skull being in, or some sort of skull,
Yeah, they definitely did an
And-
episode like.
some stuff like that. But it's got great music.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost kind of a stark beginning on some of these episodes, where it
Yeah.
just like has the name of the show and like producer Alan Landisberg, and it just kind of again adding to that almost like film strip kind of feel of it, and
Yeah.
it sort of takes, I guess you would call it maybe a pseudo-scientific approach,
Right.
but they do try to ground what they're talking about.
Well, that's nice. Like if you compare it to like some of the shows that are on now, like Ancient Aliens or
Yeah,
UFO Files or things, it's not. I mean, first of all, they go and interview people, like in their offices or whatever, or the Loch Ness Monster one, they're like talking to people on the shore of Loch Ness and scientists and people
Yeah,
from
they
National
did-
Geographic and stuff. And now it's always like somebody like just in front of some background.
Right. They did original work. They did actually not maybe full-on investigations, but they actually did stuff. They didn't just assemble a bunch of pre-existing footage. That's another thing you get
Right.
a lot now. I mean,
Yeah.
they do use like newsreel footage in this and maybe some stock footage. But yeah, you're right. They're going out and doing research. And actually, in the Loch Ness episode, Nimoy makes a big deal out of
Right.
the in search of cameras
Yeah.
that are trained on the Scottish Loch.
Right.
And
Caught.
Yes. Well, maybe
An
we should-
intriguing thing. But also like, with the exception of one person in the Amelia Earhart one, it didn't seem like they were talking to like nut jobs either.
No, and they did.
And maybe in other
I think
episodes
they
they
treated
do.
everybody with sort of a certain dignity and treated them all as equal experts or credible, possibly sometimes to their detriment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's the tone of the show is definitely not self-mocking or silly or anything like that. It's kind of
Right.
like, hey, this is going to be cool. And looking with modern eyes, 40 years later, you might see it a little differently and enjoy it in a different way. But back then, I think it was meant to be. It was sincere. So, yeah, like you said, the two mysteries basically. Amelia Earhart, of course, the legendary aviatrix, who's was making a flight around the world, and her plane disappeared in 1937. Nobody's really sure what happened to her. It's a mystery. I think some more things have come out over the years. The other episode, Loch Ness Monster, another season 1 episode. These were both aired originally in summer of 1977. Loch Ness Monster, of course, iconic creature of legend who supposedly lurks in the depths of these waters, this lake in the Scottish Highlands. And of the two mysteries, I think maybe the Amelia Earhart one I hear more about nowadays.
Yeah, Loch Ness Monster is kind of not around. I mean, not in the culture as much as it used to be.
No, I mean, I remember like Busch Gardens used to have, I don't know if they still do that roller coaster,
Right.
Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah,
It was a big deal. And
My dad had rode that and had one of those T-shirts.
yeah, like
I
I survived.
survived the
Yeah,
Loch Ness-
I survived the
yeah.
Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like people have kind of moved on from that in some ways and just
Right, like Bigfoot,
given up on it.
has all these peaks and valleys of popularity, but
Yeah.
Loch Ness Monster is kind of like. But I did go to a website yesterday, and it seemed hard to navigate. But they did have a list of there have been sightings, even within the last few
They
years.
persist.
Yeah.
Well, I think like actually this Loch Ness Monster episode, it shows a couple of I think it shows like one of the iconic photos of the sort of a neck and head.
Yeah,
it looks
which
like
that one's been debunked.
that was later proved, or I think it was all but proved to be a hoax.
Yeah,
At the time, they didn't know some of that, but the interesting thing is, it shows you kind of what a big deal is. I mean, if you take this episode at its face value, Nimoy says that there's basically 3 different major expeditions that are going on in the summer of 1976 while In Search Of is there.
yeah,
And I think one group had ties to like the National Geographic Society.
they did, and like the guy running it is the guy that found the Titanic.
So
he's not like it's Bob
yeah, these aren't like crackpots with metal detectors,
Yeah.
like trying to find something. These are people that have a genuine interest in it.
Right. Now there was some people who were putting cameras underwater, like video cameras, and like just had a TV in a tent.
Yeah.
Something about them seemed a little less scientific. Although, I mean, that seems like a reasonable approach, but just, I think maybe the look of the guy or the way he was talking, and maybe because I can't remember what his affiliation was.
Yeah, I don't either, but I did think it was interesting that, the people that thought at the time that they weren't expecting to find, like a monster surfacing and roar. They were expecting to find something like the farther down they go, the more likely they'd be to find a sighting of this, which makes sense.
Yeah.
The technology was a little bit different back then, but like you said, that seemed like a pretty good approach.
And they talked to a guy from the Smithsonian who looked just like like the way you want a scientist to look. Like he had a cool facial mustache and kind of goatee or Van Dyke, and was kind of bald, and he was basically like, I don't think anything's there.
Yeah, I actually kind of like that. He
Yeah.
basically said that, and then he talks about what may be there. And basically he's quoting like a colleague of his.
Right.
Or referring to somebody else, but he...
Yeah, to a kind of reasonable
Right.
idea that it's just that they're so if I can remember this correctly, there are eels in the lake, but eels, I guess, go out to sea to mate or go out to sea after they're born or something. But every now and then one could stay, and basically it wouldn't, so it didn't mature properly, and so then it's just there eating fish and stuff, and kind of becomes oversized.
Right.
So
could be
they
interpreted
think
as
it could be like
monster.
a 20-foot eel or something, which seems like a pretty reasonable way to look at it.
Yeah, and I like the way they handled that. I mean, the guy, he didn't come across as a total spoil sport, but
Yeah.
he did mention that, hey, I don't think there's anything in there, but if there is, this is what it might be.
Right.
And the show didn't make a big deal out of it, but they did,
Yeah.
and
And I think a lot of shows like that would then go back to a believer who
Yeah.
would just like dismiss the logical thing with complete illogic.
right. Well, and they do talk to like some of the locals that have supposedly, and people that have supposedly had encounters with. So
Yeah.
they definitely make it seem now, as far as the show's approach, this I think is a good example of a show that does tease something that it doesn't really deliver. Because in this episode, like after they did an opening, and it was kind of a cool opening, and they have some like the nice aerial footage, and so some nice synth music and everything, and shots, and Leonard Nimoy mentions what they'll talk about later, like a long trail of bubbles
Right.
that we see that were captured by the In Search of cameras.
Yeah.
So that after that opening, we see Nimoy on camera, and he basically calls the Loch Ness Monster one of the more compelling mysteries that the show will discuss.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, he strongly implies that there's new evidence that the monster exists.
Right.
And, I mean, they do sort of go into these approaches and things, but they don't really... I guess that shot of the bubbles is that new evidence. Maybe.
Yeah. Which I guess is mysterious.
Well, he says,
I mean, it is like a straight line of bubbles.
like, just breaking on the
Yeah.
surface. He does say there's no boats nearby, no divers,
Right.
but there's something that provided a disturbance there. And he builds that. I think he says that it's the biggest evidence this year at the time that something may be alive in
Right.
it, something that would be big.
Yeah.
And
then
then
it turns out also, they tease it, and I guess you think there's going to be more footage,
Yeah,
but they already showed you the footage.
that's it. Right, exactly. That's all you're getting is
Right.
that little shot of those that trail of bubbles, which
Yeah.
it doesn't go on very long,
No.
and I'm assuming that's all they have.
Yeah.
So I actually wrote this down because I like this. But so here's the best that Leonard Nimoy can do as he closes the show. This is a direct quote from the episode. None of the investigators involved disputes the probability that a creature lives in Loch Ness, and all of them agree that the intensive effort may soon turn up the monster of the lake. And then he does a little dramatic flourish and turns away and walks off.
Yeah.
It's this little thing where you see him walking off camera. It's a really cool ending to the show. But if you kind of break down what he says, there's a lot of hedging involved. Right. It's far from a definitive statement, and that's kind of what the show does.
Right.
It's kind of like that Simpsons episode where Leonard Nimoy comes down and is all satisfied that everything his work is done, and Barney says, "Oh, you didn't do anything," and he just didn't I? And kind of raises an eyebrow and walks away. That's kind of like the approach the show takes a lot. Like, well, there may be something going on.
Right. The other thing I thought about is that when I was a kid watching this, I always had the impression that he was the one doing all the work.
Yeah,
Like interviewing
exactly.
people and stuff.
Right. You always assume that, don't you?
And
Yeah.
now, unfortunately, I know, like, oh, no, this was like, he came in on Saturday and filmed, like,
Yeah.
all his intros and recorded all his voiceovers.
Oh, let's not destroy the illusion too much. I want to think that at least he was like picking topics at the beginning and just kind of doing like a editor-in-chief role,
Right, yeah.
sitting in his study, like with a big drafting board where they're bringing like sketches and storyboards, and he's got a pipe. He'd be smoking a pipe
Yeah.
while he's going over these, and he's like, this one's a little slim. Let's see if you got a little bit more on this one to flesh this out.
Get back out there.
Yeah,
Like, they brought him a Loch Ness Monster one, but they didn't actually go to Scotland. He's like, no.
yeah,
No.
That's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Now he did do. There's an episode. He's a big Vincent Van Gogh buff.
Right.
And during the 70s, he was doing a one-man show, I think, about like the whole story of his life and everything. And
Yeah.
the show did an episode of him that I think he was strongly involved with that. Like, I don't
Okay.
know if he wrote it, but I think that was like his pet project, that
Yeah.
episode. And I think he did bring that. And there was some mystery associated with that one too. So he must have really loved loved doing that. So
Yeah.
overall, though, yeah, I don't think he was he was conducting the interviews and swimming underwater and
Right.
planting cameras.
Yeah.
So, but still, it's cool. Yeah, and watching these kind of takes me back to a time when some of these things like Bigfoot and Loch Ness, they were just treated in a different way. Now it's
Yeah.
almost like oversaturation with all these like reality shows, and to
Yeah.
me, it almost like all this stuff kind of reinforces the fact that it's probably not out there.
Right.
Whereas back then, there was so much more mystery and intrigue to these kind of things. It was a little bit more fun to kind of wonder what might be.
Yeah. I liked in the Loch Ness that they didn't really even approach the idea that it was supernatural.
That's a good point. Yeah, they
Like-
didn't. It was
They treated it like if it's there, it's something, it's an animal.
right. It's
It's
something
just an
that-
animal we haven't. It could be a dinosaur, but it's still an animal.
Yeah.
Now I know they did plenty of episodes on supernatural things like the Bermuda Triangle or ghosts or
Yeah.
whatever, but in this case they didn't do that, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, it was a good episode. I mean, they showed like the legend of the monster dated back to like the 6th century,
Yeah.
to Saint Columba, and they talk about the origins of the whole myth and everything. And I thought it's an even-handed approach. There wasn't a lot of pizzazz in it, but I think it's kind of typical to the approach of the show. It's atmospheric with the music and the narration, but
Yeah.
it doesn't necessarily deliver a lot of gotcha moments. And maybe that's good, because if they had done that more with like more reenactments and showing things, it would have made the show a little bit more ridiculous and
Yeah.
less credible, I guess.
I'll add this: I've been to Loch Ness.
Did you have a sighting?
Maybe no. Of the Loch Ness Monster, no. I had a sighting of the lake.
Ah.
That's quite beautiful. Saw some trees, some rocks. I don't think I saw any of the castles or whatever, like where I was. They weren't visible, or I just
Yeah.
didn't see them. I don't know.
Were you disappointed that you didn't see a monster?
No, I mean, because I didn't expect to.
You went in with realistic expectations.
Yeah, yeah. It would be cool if I had,
Ah,
but
would have been cool if I had.
Yeah. Would have been a story I could have told.
Yeah, you could have been on camera talking
Yeah.
about your experiences, and
Right.
we would be judging whether you're a crackpot or not.
Yeah, so that was something.
Yeah.
Now, Amelia Earhart, in a way, very different episode.
Yeah, this is like a historical fact, an actual person that disappeared, and the question is what happened to this person,
Yeah.
not whether the thing existed or anything like that.
Right.
And it was a very documented life and a famous person, and just mystery what happened to her and her navigator.
Did that have any reenactments in it, do you think?
Yes, I believe it. Well,
It was hard to,
I
like,
think
at the
it did.
beginning,
Like
it looked like
the
it
footage
did.
at the opening, I think, was a reenactment.
Okay. Because
just
later
somebody
they definitely
flying a
had
plane.
footage of her and the navigator, at least.
Yeah, they had some
in the
newsreel
plane.
footage, and then they mixed in a little bit of like tasteful reenactments. But
And stuff from that movie that
yes,
was sort of loosely based
there
on
was a Hollywood movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. Like the show didn't, like something like Unsolved Mysteries actually like purporting to recreate the whole story, whereas In Search Of would use reenactments more of like this is what it would have been like, and I don't think they're trying to. It's not kind of a shady way where they're almost like trying to pass it off as what happened. I don't think that's kind of the approach they did. I think they used it more to supplement the storytelling rather than to be the basis for the storytelling.
Right.
But yeah, I actually didn't know about that movie. Like it was a
Yeah.
1943 movie with Rosalind Russell, and Fred McMurray's actually in it too.
Right.
And the reason they bring that up is because there was one of the theories of Amelia Earhart is that she was doing basically spy mission or recon missions for the government.
Yeah.
And that movie, Rosalind Russell's character was not Amelia Earhart, but she was a female pilot that was doing that. And
Right.
that's what happened to her. I guess she was. I think she was in the movie. I guess she was. Well, one of the
She had
theories
the
is that she
ditch,
was
so-
shot down
Yeah.
and captured as a spy by the Japanese.
Right.
And the movie basically lays it out as that's what Amelia Earhart was doing, and
Yeah.
or at least many people think. They didn't actually say it, but they think that they were presenting a theory of what happened to Amelia Earhart in that movie.
Right. It looked like in the movie that she just had to, I think, to escape capture, she ditched the plane.
She bailed on, yeah,
But I mean, she died too.
yeah.
the
Flight for
crash.
Freedom was the name of the movie.
Yeah. So and they talked to three older gentlemen who are all kind of obsessed with this, figuring this out.
Yeah,
Two of them seemed very reasonable, and when I looked into it later, I think both of their theories are still basically the ones that are the most popular. One being, so one was a guy who is an expert in navigation, I think, right?
yeah, like a Captain Elgin Long.
Yeah. So he believed he kind of had figured out where, basically that she ran out of gas and was off course and crashed near where she was supposed to land to refuel.
Right.
And there are radio transmissions and things that that's based on. And then the other one was a former CBS reporter who had done a story on this and gotten intrigued. And his theory was that she had been taken prisoner, not necessarily because she was spying, but definitely taken prisoner by the Japanese and had died in Saipan.
Yeah, she was executed basically.
Right.
And
he had talked to people, witnesses there and stuff.
Yeah, and his story involved, like he says that there's a lot of classified documents that reveal that, like, Japanese interrogation of Earhart, like documents or information that the government had acquired but was withholding. So, like, a lot of the basis of his story is sort of that there's some kind of, like, cover-up going on, and he is trying to uncover these classified documents.
And possibly because even before they said he was a journalist or a broadcaster. Mm-hmm. Like, he seemed like a broadcaster.
Yeah.
Like, just he started talking in this very smooth way and had this interesting voice.
Yeah, Fred Gerner, I think is his name.
And then the other guy, who's actually the first guy they talk about, was retired from the Air Force. And you see him, and he looks very of his time. I don't know if he lives in Hawaii, but he's got like a long sleeved kind of Hawaiian shirt and like one of those surfer necklaces, and I'm not sure what was going on with his hair. And he also went with the spy theory, and everything seemed okay. Well, all right, she was spying for that.
Sure, could happen.
And I mean, we know about now different people, sort of famous people doing spy work.
Yeah, or what we're calling spy work doesn't necessarily involve, like, James Bond. It could be just as simple as, like, look, while you're here,
take some pictures
of this.
You're flying over. So.
Yeah, so the term could be used a little bit more loosely or whatever. But his story at first sounds very reasonable.
Right. And then he says that he thinks she came back and went into hiding and ended up in Leisure World in New Jersey.
Right.
And... and he says this woman came to one of his lectures, and he could tell because he has thousands of pictures of her, which there it's already getting a little weird, and he knows that face and everything. And then in a way that, I mean, the editing of this felt like sort of like a 70s kind of, not indie film, but like a 70s film or a European film or something. There's just like this abrupt cut to the woman he's talking about at a chaotic press conference, just angrily saying, "I am not Amelia Earhart."
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
This is ridiculous. And then they cut back to him, and he's just like, "Well, no, he doesn't even say no. It's not like he's refuted. He's just like, I'm certain of this. I know her face, and I believe this will have a happy ending."
Yeah. And
just dead calm.
And he says that he's been, like, following her. And I think this woman, he's been following her for years.
Right.
So it's like he's been monitoring this woman that he is convinced is Amelia Earhart.
Yeah.
Based on a facial resemblance that he sees.
Right.
And, he claims that
and she's roughly the same age, I guess.
Somehow escaped being a political prisoner. Yeah, returned and was at this Leisure World.
Right.
And... yeah, I almost wanted to see that. That's a very good description of how the way they do it. The editing is a little abrupt.
Yeah.
And they do this several times. They go back and forth, and she gets increasingly agitated, and they get increasingly close up on her, and she's like, "This is ridiculous. I am not Amelia Earhart." And she's probably had her life ruined to some extent by this guy doing that. And I kind of wanted to see like a split screen, make it real 70s with like a big split screen, and then both of them at the same time saying their stuff, and so you could see it playing out at once. That would have been the only way they could improve on that. But that.
And so I looked up some stuff afterwards, and she sued. So there was someone else wrote a book based on his research that was briefly published, and then she sued for like $1.5 million. Mm. And I don't know that she won the money, but they did take the book off the shelves. And then she died in 1982, and this guy requested photographs of her and fingerprints. And his request was denied.
Aha! What are they trying to cover up? If she's not Amelia Earhart, just give them the evidence, and then
Yeah.
everything will be proven.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't find that guy particularly credible.
No.
That was
But I kind of liked that they didn't have Nimoy comment on that. They
No.
basically commented with the editing.
They did. They showed that the juxtaposition of it was enough. They let the story speak for itself. They didn't have Nimoy come on, raise an eyebrow. They could have inserted shots of him raising his eyebrow when the guy said that he had been watching her for 16 years or whatever, But they didn't do that.
I would like to see that cut, though.
I would like to see it. Yeah, I can't deny that.
Yeah. And that probably makes the other two guys more credible.
I think it
because
does.
He's first.
That may have been. That's interesting the way they arranged that. They put the most out there theory at the beginning, and then they present the other two. And again, now it seems to me like I think the prevailing theory, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the prevailing theory now is that they bailed. They landed on an island because I think they found fragments of a plane, like on one of the islands that they think is. And I think the theory is that they died on the island. Which is,
I think so. Which for some reason I thought it had been kind of definitively solved.
Yeah,
but apparently it hasn't.
Yeah, I think something that they found like last year. I think there's indication that they've actually found a fragment of the plane.
Yeah.
And the fact that they found the fragment of the plane, like in the vicinity of this desert island, makes them think more or at least it rules out some theories, right?
Right.
It rules out, and again, this show doesn't really get into like supernatural.
No.
Aspects of like the plane went into a black hole, or
right.
The plane was abducted by aliens or something like that, or even it doesn't even really address the possibility that they defected or something like that and landed the plane safely.
Right.
I think people now realize something happened to the plane, like something catastrophic.
Yeah.
Who knows what the reason were, and they either died in the crash or they died shortly thereafter. It's kind of sad to think of them dying on the island.
Yeah.
Because who knows how that went. But I think that seems to be where most people would lean.
And as we know, I mean, even now, it's not always easy to find a plane after it crashes.
Exactly. Yeah. This was 40 years ago, and it's still basically it's not conclusively solved, and it may never be. But there may still be hope. I mean, this is one where theoretically you could still find something. Some new evidence could still turn up. I mean, just the fact that last year evidence was still turning up. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I think in the end of this episode, Nimoy basically says, "We don't know what happened, and that the search will continue." And and then he quotes a letter that she wrote to her husband before her last flight. So it was kind of an inspirational note in the episode. Sort of ended a little bit positive, even though it really didn't solve anything about the mystery. It just sort of presented these things out there, and again, sort of implied that we may be closer to finding a solution, but it's all still kind of conjecture at this point. And it's 40 years now. This was about 40 years after the 40 years after the original. So it's It's kind of like that's the equidistant point between where we are now, and it's kind of fascinating that some of these things still aren't solved.
Yeah.
Even with the way the world is now. But I enjoyed this episode.
Yeah, and actually, going back to those three guys, it just got me thinking about like sort of old guys obsessing about things, like getting like that becoming their retirement hobby.
Yeah,
just as one thing, and kind of wondering what mine will be.
Yeah. Well, and back then, if you think about it, there was no internet.
Yeah.
So you had to wear a lot of shoe leather out by going and investigating this stuff, or at least going to your library and poring over like newspapers. I mean, nowadays, like with recent airline tragedies, we've had reports of like amateur sleuths, basically, and you can use like Google Maps and all these resources to kind of do stuff sitting at your computer. And not that that's a bad thing, but this was kind of an entirely different thing back then. I mean, retired people going out and talking to people and staking out leisure world, taking photos from the bushes, whatever he's doing. I don't know.
Apparently doing lectures on it.
Yeah.
I mean, he must have been, at least for a while, maybe a respected figure. Like maybe before, because
he was a major in the I think the Army or the Air Force. Air Force, yeah.
And I mean, until he starts pointing the finger at this poor woman.
Yeah.
his ideas are reasonable.
Right, and he's not hesitant. He communicates clearly.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see that he would be an effective lecturer.
Right.
But
And he does have thousands of photographs of her.
Yes.
Um,
Well, and at the time, I mean, the other thing too is these topics. I don't know if they're still. We talked about Loch Ness Monster. And I think Amelia Earhart is. Boy, it's been 40 years. Maybe she's faded into history a little bit more.
Yeah.
They're still iconic to an extent, but these were pretty big topics. I mean, you can clearly see, in the 70s, Amelia Earhart, it was still a big deal, and people would love to know what happened. I think that's one of the things that made this show popular, probably just the essential fact of, hey, people love a mystery, and maybe an unexplained mystery is better than an explained mystery, actually.
yeah. Yeah. Going back to the Loch Ness Monster.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there is one?
No.
Okay.
Well, again, I don't want to hedge, but I think it's possible there could be some overgrown.
Something, yeah.
Yeah, I sound like I'm making it like making some cartoonish. You overstuffed sea serpent or dishonest John on Beanie and Cecil or something like that. But I think it's a possibility that there's some kind of mutated animal, but I don't believe of some supernatural. And it seems like even the sightings and even the legends that have sprung up around it point towards something, like a mammal of some kind as opposed to some supernatural presence. Whereas I think when I was a kid, I assumed it was some kind of like ghost serpent or some kind of supernatural thing. And now it's like, well, even if there was something there, it's kind of like a big thing. So if it's just a big serpent, that kind of makes it not so much a big deal, right?
Yeah, I mean, if it's an animal that we don't know, that's cool.
Yeah.
Because it's a new animal. I mean, a new animal is always exciting.
Right.
Even though a lot of times, like, you see articles about that and then you go and it's just like a new frog or something.
Yeah.
I think scientifically that is exciting. It at least suggests that, well, some of these things, these cryptozoological things could be out there, just given the fact that we're still finding animals that we didn't know existed. And if it were like a plesiosaur or something, that would definitely be a big deal. Mm-hmm. But if it's just like a big eel.
Yeah. Well, if there's something that's been around, even if something that's been around like 1,500 years, if it was the same animal, I think that's kind of cool.
A pretty big deal.
But otherwise, it's...
I mean, I guess that they don't get into that, but clearly if it's a dinosaur or something, there's probably more than one, because otherwise, then it'd have to be supernatural.
Yeah.
To still be alive.
Right. Which would be cool. Which would bring it back around like that. I'd be impressed by.
Well, right. Or if it was, like a space creature.
Yeah.
Or something, or another dimensional creature, or
I personally think by now, if there was something more to it, but now there's something else. There's another possibility that there was something there that's not there anymore.
Yeah, it could be.
It's been so long since this started.
A carcass on the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, right.
Which would be cool too if they. I mean, sad for the thing, but if they found a big carcass on.
Yeah.
Bottom of the lake.
Yeah, like
I know the lake is really murky, so they don't really do a lot of submersible kind of stuff. But
burgers for the whole village for months. So, what do you think? Do you think there's something to this, or?
I would say, I don't know, 50-50. Well, like I'm more. I feel like there's some more to, like Bigfoot.
All right.
Like I feel like there's something there. I don't know what it is, but
okay.
So I would lay odds on that before.
So you don't dispute the probability that a creature does live in Loch Ness?
I don't. No.
Okay. That's all. That's good enough for us.
And someone may find it.
Yeah. Okay. That's good enough for me. Well, let's run with that.
As far as Amelia Earhart, will we ever know what happened?
We may.
We might, or maybe not.
True.
It might be a mystery for the times.
Yeah, during mystery. Yeah, Amelia Earhart, I kind of think that's something where there's probably a simple explanation. I don't believe that she survived the war and all that. And
no.
It's kind of, I don't know. I tend to think of all like the unsolved mysteries, the famous unsolved mysteries. That's one that I would lean more towards there being, well, it's probably just one of the things where it's the simplest explanation is probably the one that.
Let me ask you this. If she did survive the war, why would she have to go into hiding? Why wouldn't she be, say, she had been a spy or reconnaissance, whatever, was captured by the Japanese, or even not a spy, but just captured by the Japanese. Then after the war, they returned her to us.
Yeah.
The war's over. We won. It's not like, I mean, what, do we lose face by saying she was taking pictures?
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. And
Did she just not want to deal with it?
yeah, well,
Did she hate her husband, which she didn't seem to? And,
yeah.
you know,
This is
does she not want to be part of Putnam Brothers Publishing?
yes, the Lifetime movie. In the Lifetime movie version of Amelia Earhart, she was it was an elaborate plot to get away from her vengeful, abusive husband.
Oh.
She faked a plane disappearance and then ran off with sexy, charismatic Fred Noonan, her navigator, and lived on a desert island for years. No, that's a good question. And from what you see of her and what you know about her, she seems proud of her accomplishments, and she was very focused on these accomplishments. Like, she was the first woman that flew solo over the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
She did all this stuff, so it seems nonsensical that she would not want to tell this story, or that she would give up her whole vocation,
Celebrity, yeah.
aviation, just that she would quit flying.
Right.
I don't think. Well, I won't name her.
Yeah.
I don't think the woman that was fingered by that major was sneaking off and flying a prop plane in her spare time just to. I don't think she could just give it up like that. That makes no sense to me, and I think that's one of the big things. Like, what would anybody have to gain by covering it up, unless she was some kind of double agent or something like that?
Yeah, if she had been doing something for the Japanese.
Right. That would add a different layer, and then you could see, well, she would want to live a quiet life at Leisure World. Right. But
she was an assassin, and she continued to do that, and then killed JFK.
That was in Joseph Gervais's later lectures. He tied it all together after this episode.
That's right. It's all connected.
Like, wait a minute. You might have been getting tired of this theory, but I got something else for you.
The Illuminati hired.
Yes. Amelia Earhart was the babushka woman that was running away in Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.
It was captured on film. That's what we need. We need an In Search Of episode to deal with the grand unified conspiracy theory that unites every great conspiracy in history. And, some of these things we're talking about were covered in other episodes. Actually,
I think
there's
several. Oswald.
There's several In Search Ofs that did the JFK, and then there's I think one of the episodes which I've never seen this episode. There's one called Laugh Therapy, which apparently explores the theory that laughter may really be the best medicine, and that seems to me like probably not one of the better episodes of the show's run. But there's like you said, there's aliens, ghosts, and these are kind of more. Amelia Earhart is definitely more kind of a natural mystery, but I think they did the D.B. Cooper thing would have been early 70s, was that? So
I think so.
Yeah. So I like this show. I like its approach, but if this show were made today and did the exact same approach, I don't think I'd watch it. I'd be mocking it if I did watch it. Where now we're kind of affectionately talking about it, but there's just something essentially so cool about it. It's very easy to watch. Yeah, I think I'll definitely be checking out more episodes of this.
The probability of me checking out more episodes is high.
I don't dispute that, and I think we can both agree that the intensive effort that we're making to seek out more episodes may soon turn up more episodes to watch. This episode brought to you by The Touch of Leonard Nimoy, the spoken word / singing you're in search of. This episode also brought to you by the Scottish Tourist Board. Our lakes have monsters, our bags have pipes, and our sheep stomachs have haggis. This episode also brought to you by Leisure World. We also hit the Lindbergh baby and helped fake the moon landing. What we'd like to see. Welcome back, and it's time for What We'd Like to See, a segment where Mike and I examine some things that we haven't seen. We can't talk about with any knowledge yet, but we'll talk about it a little bit because we'd like to see it eventually. And today, Mike, the one thing that I would really like to see, this is something for a long time. It's a sitcom. It aired on CBS in 1976 for only a couple of months, and it's called Ball 4. Yeah, there haven't been a lot of successful sports shows, and even less sports situation comedies, I believe. But this one was based on one of my favorite books of all time, Ball 4, by Jim Bouton. He was a pitcher, and he wrote basically it was a tell-all book. It was considered groundbreaking for its time. It was about the 1969 Seattle Pilots and their first year of existence. And actually, I think their only year. They eventually moved to Milwaukee. But he wrote a book. He had been a Yankees pitcher before, and then he was kind of trying to reinvent himself. Later in his career, he had arm troubles. He became like a knuckleball pitcher. But Ball 4 was a tell-all book. It delved into things that sports biographies and sports books in general just didn't get into. Tales about things in the clubhouse, about players chasing women who weren't their wives on the road, amphetamine use, things like that.
Right.
Stuff that wouldn't be considered way too controversial now, but at the time he was ostracized by some people, and a lot of people resented the fact that he wrote this book.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, he was upfront about what he was doing. I think he tried to hide it at first, but people eventually realized that he was keeping a diary.
Uh-huh.
They didn't necessarily know what he was going to include in it, but so anyways, 7 years, or I guess 5 or 6 years after the book came out, and there was also a co-writer, I think Leonard Schechter was his name, that helped Boughton write that book and a couple of other ones. But they had this idea, I guess, to do a comedy based on that experience. So the show was set in, it was a fictional, it wasn't the Seattle Pirates, it was the fictional Washington Americans. And I think in the very first episode, from what I've read, he told his teammates he was going to write a book about the team, and then there's conflicts based on that. I think I've seen like a little bit of footage of the opening, maybe on the internet, but I've never seen an episode of this. I don't know if anybody has this anywhere. I don't know if it's re-aired anywhere.
Right.
But it sounds fascinating to me, being a big baseball guy and a lover of old sitcoms. So to me, it's kind of a no-brainer that I'd love to see this at some point.
I would think it would be really tame compared to the book, too.
Exactly. Yeah, I think definitely so. That's kind of a problem. Like how do you really get into the nature of the conflict and why the players are so upset about it?
Right.
I mean, I think it wasn't just kind of what he told, but some people back in those days resented the very idea of writing a book about it at all. It was, the clubhouse. What goes on in the clubhouse stays in the clubhouse. I think there's like a sign that would be in like sports locker rooms: what you say here, what you do here, let it leave here when you stay here, something to that effect. So just the fact that anybody would write anything, even innocuous things, would be, cause for objection. But yeah, I'm not sure how much they could get into, stories about Mickey Mantle and Willie Mays, and Greenies, as they were called. I don't think they would be getting into that on CBS. Or
womanizing, or
right.
Yeah.
I mean, there are all sorts of hijinks and things, and I recommend. I mean, it's a classic baseball book, and it's very entertaining, not just because of salacious details, but it's very well written, and there's a lot of good insight into sports, being an athlete at the kind of in the twilight of your career, the atmosphere of being on like this kind of incompetent or this baseball team full of like people that were rejected by other teams and things like that. So it seems like there might be potential for a good underdog sports comedy there, but clearly it didn't last. Yeah. And it's definitely a rarity to this day. I don't recognize too many other people in the cast except Ben Davidson, who I assume is the former Oakland Raiders football player with the colorful mustache, plays a character named Rhino Rhinelander.
Ooh.
So that guy's a character, right?
Yeah, he probably breaks stuff.
Yeah, and chugs beers.
Yeah.
One of the cruder people. It's like the more I'm thinking about this, the more I'm thinking of like an R-rated 1970s movie, something like North Dallas 40.
Yeah.
Or sort of that kind of sports movie, not something that would be necessarily an effective weekly sitcom, but.
Right. So that guy would be like Belushi in Animal House.
Yeah, that's what I kind of think. That guy, yeah.
Like, do you think the set, like the main set, would be the clubhouse?
Yeah, from what I understand, a lot of it takes place in the suits, like a workplace comedy.
Yeah.
In a sense, with the clubhouse, and I'm sure that they wouldn't be spending a lot of money on actual game footage.
Right.
And I guess maybe you could have like a set with like a manager's office, because the manager's got to talk to him and stuff like that. And there's got to be at least one or two civilian characters, like maybe like a sympathetic reporter or something like that.
They somehow got to have at least one female character.
Yeah, I'm thinking like a female. You could even really get into some new ground, like having like a female reporter, and she's got her own issues, and they worry about that kind of thing. But people don't really seem to take to sports comedies. It's not like a common thing, and even baseball shows in general.
Yeah.
There was like that Dean Cain one a couple of years ago, like Clubhouse. I think it was based on like some bat boy or something like that. But you don't see too many of them.
I think we've mentioned the Bad News Bears one before.
Yeah, which didn't last.
No, that didn't last. And I can't think of baseball shows.
Yeah,
Certainly.
yet it's funny because like some like the Major League franchise,
Right.
maybe some of them more than others are fondly remembered. I think even like disproportionately. And our culture is so obsessed with sports and everything that
Yeah.
I'm surprised people don't try this more often. But
I mean, in a way, it seems like it has a built-in structure of just games. Like, definitely for a drama, would just have, like, and I'm sure Friday Night Lights use that a lot, just
yeah, you
the build up to Friday.
right.
So you always have a thing on the schedule.
Yeah, there was like that Bay City Blues show I think with Stephen Bochco
Uh-huh.
about like a softball team that I think had a young Sharon Stone and Dennis France maybe in it, and some of those have showed up on ESPN Classic. So there's definitely some rarities out there, but like this is something that like when ESPN Classic was still kind of being pushed by ESPN.
Yeah.
I really wish they would have put something like this on there. If they did, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah. And it seems like something they, like HBO or someone could do now,
Yeah,
effectively.
very
They
much
could
so.
show all the misbehavior, and it could still be a sitcom in the way HBO comedies are, getting them outside of the clubhouse and
Sure.
all of that. But it does seem like a really bad fit.
Yeah, I can think of a lot of ways this wouldn't work, but I'd like to see for myself.
But at the same time, I wouldn't mind seeing like if I didn't know that it's based on that book, like if it were just like a workplace sitcom about a baseball team, that might work.
Mhm.
It seems like maybe we're imagining it not working just because of what it couldn't be.
Yeah,
But it seems like you could have like a traditional sitcom in an environment like that.
well, I
I
mean,
mean,
now,
you can't show the sports really,
yeah,
but that's fine. I mean, workplace sitcoms really don't show people working.
yeah,
If you think about it, it's surprising anyone has a job because they're never working. They're always
Yeah.
doing other stuff,
yeah,
getting involved in antics.
yeah,
Though having it be, a baseball team in the clubhouse, that does limit kind of, especially then, how do you fit a woman into that situation where probably a woman wouldn't be allowed in the clubhouse unless you do, like you said, like
right.
a reporter trying to
And
get
that would
in.
have been, yeah. I mean, I guess you could have the players' wives and things like that and sort of get into that. But
Yeah.
again, the more you involve that, the more you want to tell other kinds of stories that CBS probably wasn't ready for.
And you probably weren't going to, so you wouldn't have a romance angle really, because, I mean, they're not going to have a couple on the team, probably.
Right,
I
yeah.
got to deal with that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that takes out, one of the angles of most sitcoms. Wonder, like, if they went on the road, would they just be in a different clubhouse?
Yeah, you could do that, or you could have them, like in a hotel bars and
Yeah,
stuff like that, and
that's
that'd
true.
be the moves.
Yeah. If a baseball team goes on the road, there's not like a visitor's clubhouse, is
Yeah.
there? Is?
Yeah.
And the clubhouse is different than the locker room, or is that just the name for the?
I think, well, yeah, it kind of all goes. It's kind of like a big sprawling thing. I think
Okay.
probably what would be considered the clubhouse, but what you'd probably consider on TV would be basically like a locker room.
Yeah.
Like
Maybe
just
with,
kind
like,
of
a
visual, like a
table
huge
or
locker room with a
something.
bunch, yeah, like a training table and
Yeah.
stuff, and yeah,
Guys playing cards.
yeah, exactly.
Right.
Smoking back then,
Yeah.
drinking,
But that's it.
yeah,
Not, not doing lines of cocaine off the training table.
Yeah.
or-
yeah, like. Yeah, again,
Popping
the more you
pills.
think of it, it's like what were they going there? I'm not sure. I'm still not sure how much is inherently a good idea about a comedy set and like with a baseball team, unless you get into some of this other stuff. So
yeah.
maybe it was ahead of its time, or I don't know.
Right.
The book was definitely way ahead of its time.
Yeah.
The TV show, it seems like it kind of missed the boat, and it was just an attempt to cash in.
And didn't that guy? Didn't he end up on that Portland team?
Oh, the independent. Yeah,
Yeah.
he bounced around with like some independent teams and he wrote a couple other books, and apparently he was like an executive producer and helped write for this show too. So he
Okay.
was involved in it, and he wrote another lesser known follow-up books, but he actually got into sportscasting
Uh-huh.
and wrote a pretty good book about that after he retired from baseball. So he's definitely been around. His big legacy continues to be probably writing that book, even though he played for the Yankees like in the 1960s when. And some teams that were were actually good as well. I mean, the Yankees
Right.
kind of declined for a while there, but yeah, the Ball Four, the book, is fondly remembered, has an excellent legacy. The TV show remains just an obscurity that I've never seen any of this available for sale or for viewing somewhere. So I guess that'd be one I'd have to track down at the Paley Center or something like that.
Yeah, on our field trip.
Yeah.
Right. Is there any other names of, like, do they list in your
The
book
character
like,
names?
character names or creative people or any?
No, I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, who produced the show? I'm not sure if anybody notable did that. Like I say, actors don't really stand out, but you can kind of see like the diversity that they tried to get in the cast by some of the character names.
Uh-huh.
In addition to Rhino Rhinelander, and the main character is Jim Barton. Get it? And then the manager's last name is Capagrosso.
Ah.
Can you guess what his nickname was on the show? Capagrosso. What they called the teammates called their manager Capagrosso.
Grossy.
Close. Cap.
Cap. Yeah.
Bill Westlake, Coach Pinky Pinkney,
Okay.
Lenny Birdman Siegel, Rayford Plunkett, Orlando Lopez, and CB Travis. So
Yeah.
I'm sure these were, a range of broad stereotypes in this clubhouse, probably.
Raymond Plunkett.
Rayford
Plunkett. That's a cool one. Played by, am I reading this right? Marco St. John.
Yes.
That's a cool name too.
Yeah.
They probably wish they could have used that in the show.
Yeah.
Bill McCutcheon sounds like a real baseball player name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recognize any of those.
I'm sure there were all kinds of humorous misunderstandings and conversations between CB Travis and Rayford Plunkett.
Yeah.
I'm sure there were a lot of culture clashes in that.
Do you think
that
CB
clubhouse.
Travis was obsessed with CB radio?
Maybe.
Had like one in the
I hadn't thought of that.
clubhouse?
Yeah, I was just thinking he was like going to be a stereotypical Southern guy with talk about hunting and fishing and
right.
stuff like that.
That could be.
Yeah. Everybody else would just
And
look at him.
Rayford Plunkett maybe was the intellectual of.
That's not where I would have
That's not
gone. I'm kind of curious what Lenny Birdman Siegel was. Why they called him Birdman.
Right.
I'm
I feel
thinking,
like he's a pitcher.
okay, could be. I'm thinking of him as like a hustler type.
Yeah. Okay.
Like he'd always be up to something, have some scheme going on.
Right.
Maybe he'd be running gambling rings in the clubhouse.
See, now the show's coming. It's just Bilko
Yeah.
in a baseball setting.
Yeah.
I mean, gambling, of course, for a professional baseball team is unseemly, but
Yeah. I mean, he might, maybe he
as
has,
long as he's not gambling on baseball.
yeah, maybe he's got like, he's always like on the track or something like that. He's always got something involved, something going on, a little action going on.
Yeah. I assume the manager was like old
Yeah.
and craggy.
Grizzled.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he has the additional Italian thing going on.
Yeah.
What was his last name?
Capagrosso.
Capagrosso, yeah.
Yeah. Capagrosso.
Right. Who played him?
Jack Somack.
Oh, of course.
And you've got Coach Pinky Pinkney.
Yeah.
He's probably even older than the manager. He's like a guy that's been around in baseball forever,
Right.
Nobody really knows how old he is, but he's always dispensing, walking
Yeah.
into a scene and giving some wise one-liner, and
Right. Just before he injects him with speed.
right.
All that happened off camera. It'd be implied.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, hey, I got something to show you in the other room.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm right.
Come
Yeah.
back and.
Yeah. And then everybody else is just talking about, hey, we're out of Cracker Jacks. Oh, come on. Hey, Pinky, can't you do anything to get us more Cracker Jacks in here after the game? See what I can do.
Rhino keeps taking the prize.
Yeah. Yeah, and then Rhino would do like a really loud belch.
Yeah.
And like the prize would fall out of his mouth. Well, that might be entertaining for a while, but more than one episode of that, I don't know. I don't know if it would work.
Well, if anybody out there has an archival
Yeah,
tape of
please
this,
let us know, and we'd be glad to watch it, screen it, and compare it to what our expectations
Yeah.
were to what actually was produced. Yeah, I'd love to see it.
right? How long did it air? Is that a couple months?
It was on 2 months. I think I read like a dozen episodes, maybe 12 or 13 episodes, but it was on September 1976, and it was off the air by November 1976.
Wow.
So not a big run.
Do you think it made? Well, I don't, did they have sweeps back then?
Yes, I did. I guess this would have been pulled just before sweeps.
So really,
September and October.
In October, it was probably up against real baseball.
Yeah, it could have been.
Or pulled from the air.
Yeah.
Really, only one episode aired.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if
Yeah.
all. I'm not sure exactly how many episodes. I'd be happy with just one, but
Right.
yeah, there definitely aren't a whole lot of them out there.
Yeah.
But maybe we'll see a DVD box set someday. Just the thing for the baseball fan your list for Father's Day or Christmas or
Yeah.
whatever occasion may be.
Well, when we start our offshoot DVD distribution company.
Yes, this will be one of
We'll
our
license
first
that one,
releases. Our rare gems that we discover from the archives.
Right. The what we'd like to see.
Now you can
DVD
see
series.
it. Yeah. There you go. That's a great idea. We got a hook.
Right.
Somebody wants to put this together, you can feel free to use the what we'd like to see Battle of the Network shows branding with appropriate compensation for us, of course.
Of course.
But either way, let's just get it out there.
And by appropriate compensation, we mean more than just free DVDs.
Yes, exactly. And more than just free Cracker Jacks.
Right. And don't take the prize out before you give us free Cracker Jacks.
Exactly. What we'd like to see. Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network shows.
This entire episode, is shrouded with mystery.
I am not a mystery woman. I am not Amelia Earhart.